Just leave it a couple more seconds. So today's masterclass is going to focus on cyber resilience and the impact of AI. And before I go on to introduce you to our host for today's session, I'm just going to run through the general house rules that we have here at CIISec. So if you've attended our webinars before, you will be aware that you'll be muted during the webinar. But don't worry, if you want to ask questions and everything, please type those through to us using the Q&A box. I think it's at the bottom for you. Type those through to us and we'll be able to pick those up on your behalf at the end and ask them on behalf of you to our speakers and everything. If you have any problems at all today, technically, please just bring it to our attention. If you can email us at support@CIISec.org, another member of our team will be able to pick that up for you on the other side and make sure we can get that resolved for you. So I think that's it, just really quickly running through those. Now I just want to hand you over to our host. Today's host is Chris Hodson, who is one of our directors here at CIISec. Chris has an enormous amount of experience in a variety of different sectors and works really closely with us in the community here at CIISec. So over to you, Chris. Chris is just going to do some further introductions and introduce you to our speakers today.
Thank you. I didn't realise I was getting such an illustrious bio intro. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here, albeit virtually, for this session. We have two guests today who their content is going to be far more interesting than mine. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the Chartered Institute of Information Security Professionals, or CIISec. So I know we have some people on the phone today, or on Zoom today, who aren't members and kind of might be considering being members. So as Sophie said, I'm a board member here. I've been on the board back when, or prior to charter status, so back when we were the Institute of Information Security Professionals, and been with the Institute for about the past 3 years. I try not to speak and let people read at the same time. You can kind of see what we do, but we are the only Chartered Institute of Information Security Professionals, and kind of deliverables wise, you know, promoting the profession, providing sanity and ratification of research, engaging with academic and commercial organisations, and just ensuring that cybersecurity is considered holistically. And I know a lot of people say that, but ensuring that people understand another truism coming up, but it's not just technology, you know, the people and the processes and developing those people, that's vitally important to our industry. And, you know, I'm proud to be a board member here and probably will be for a while to come. So that's kind of an overview of what I knew this would happen. Here we go. This is more the how. The lag on Zoom when you do remote is rather painful. Sophie, can you just take control and do the slides? It's not working. Fab. If you could just go back to the skills framework, if you wouldn't mind. Brilliant. We were trying to be clever and avoid the old next, but I think this will probably work better. So the skills framework is kind of the basis for, I wouldn't say everything that we do, but certainly for qualifying the experience of our members, and also used by corporate members to, you know, establish areas for improvement in their own organizations. And breaking that into the various domains allows people to kind of target their education based on areas that they need to improve. So today's masterclass, you know, we're going to be focusing on AI and machine learning, but there have been various other masterclasses to date looking at everything from security assurance, penetration testing, red team, through to, I remember hosting one last year around security strategy, architecture and design, and going into different levels of detail, depending on the audience and depending on the level of accreditation, is something that we do for all of these. So today's is a masterclass, largely aimed at kind of full members and fellows, but of course we have an associate development program and various other kind of affiliate oriented things that we're doing at the moment as well. So it's all very interesting. Next slide, please, Sophie. Fantastic. That leads me nicely on to the different levels that we have. So, you know, everything from associate level or even student affiliate through to fellowship. Most of our members, I would say, fall into the associate and full categories. And we also have more from kind of like a government perspective, NCSC certified CCP accreditation. So again, awards are aligned to CIISec kind of membership levels. But if there are any questions around kind of where you fit, where you feel your experience kind of aligns to these levels, I think we'll be providing some email addresses at the end. There's a lot of content on the CIISec website as well. So yeah, go and check that out. Next slide, please. Fab. So why be a member? You know, we've talked about Masterclass today. We've talked about kind of the ADP program, but what else do we do? So, you know, CIISec Live is our annual event, running that in London and Edinburgh. I believe that's 2021. I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's in April. I also believe that that's going to be a mixture of kind of virtual and in person this year, but that's an opportunity to meet other members, to meet kind of leading industry experts who run a series of keynote talks, collaboration and innovation sessions. So that's great. Member events, I won't go through all of these. Member events we touched on, Masterclass, CCP, ADP. There's also local branch events. So if you don't have a local chapter in your area, reach out, speak up. Certainly while everyone's virtual, establishing those isn't particularly difficult, I don't believe. So having those locally is something that allows people to get together who can't always make it into London, where a lot of the in-person events take place. A couple of others I'll point out here, but Pulse magazine. So Pulse is our quarterly magazine, I think it's quarterly, that we put out, and we're trying to align that to whatever topic we have for the Masterclass series. So we've just released one on kind of AI and machine learning. Previously, we've had them around security assurance, code review, governance. If you do want to contribute to Pulse, if you want to write an article, if you want to be interviewed, you know, drop a line to the guys at CIISec and they can get back to you on that one. And what else do I need to say there? Yeah, just get back to us with any questions. The next events that we have coming up, there is a virtual branch masterclass in cybercrime. That's going to be great. Unfortunately, I can't actually make that one. And then kind of an innovation webinar later on in October around security assurance, another area of the skills framework. So with that, Sophie, if you could move on to the next slide. I kind of want to introduce one of our speakers today. So Chris Grover's here today to talk about kind of the impact of AI and machine learning on our industry. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the talk. I don't want to ruin it. But when I looked at Chris's bio, I thought, wow, it's a lot more interesting and varied than mine. So whilst Chris is now the CIO of Spectra, and he spent time running the cyber practice over at Airbus. He's been a security director over at KPMG. And I was interested to hear kind of bureau chief on a UN mission to Somalia, which is you know, far more varied and interesting than my background. But Chris, if I can hand over to you for the talk, if people could write questions in the chat channel, we'll collate those. And Chris, if you don't mind, have a bit of a panel session at the end today.
Sure thing. Thank you, Chris. Can everybody hear me? I'll take that as a yes.
Loud and clear.
Right, shall I try to change slides then? I'll press the mouse and see if it works. So I think whilst I'm waiting to see if it's a Zoom lag, I'll just I'll kind of quickly give you a bit of background as to why I'm here. So Spectra Analytics is a boutique AI shop. Most of the guys and girls there are hugely intelligent and have all got kind of PhDs in the data science space. I'm the simple cyber practitioner who's come along to add a bit of kind of reality into the world. But as it says on the bio, and yeah, I'm sure I can talk about it over a beer afterwards if such things exist when we get back to the normal world. I think that the key thing to say is that all the views here are mine. And I'm here because I spun up an article for Sophie for the Pulse, and they said, "Oh, that sounds kind of good. Can you talk to us about it?" So I'll kind of quickly run through some of the key pieces which I went through in that article. Just waiting for the slide to change over. So why now? I've put up a couple of quotes there, which are from the AFCEA it's called Cyber Tech event, which takes place over in Maryland every year. The last one was September last year, I think. And what you've got there, which I think is really key, is how the Americans are looking upon AI into cyber. And to boil it down, what they're saying is it will be the kind of next big thing. What was also interesting, and I still find that the US is far better at linking its kind of industry into government, is that their current CIO, Don Deasy, came from the FS sector. And even he was clear that it was a far more complex model he was now trying to operate in the DoD, in the Department of Defense. But there were two things that he was talking about, which is why he says that they needed AI. The first one was about persistent engagement, and the second, trusted partnerships. Now, from the first statement, what he means is they have adversaries who are crawling all over the networks, whose ability probably overmatches theirs. And the only way that they can deal with that is through trusted partnerships. And there are two things which you will get from those partnerships, which is an ability to leverage the best skills in the game. And I think all of us are aware of the skill shortages, but also a need to push on the automation side so we can get rid of some of those more mundane and repetitive tasks. And that's a good segue, I think, into where kind of AI and automation starts to take us. But let's start with the basics, because I find that oftentimes what happens is that people say, so what is AI? I'm going to start one back actually and talk about machine learning, if it comes up. And I'm not going to read through that slide, but in essence, you can see that what we have with machine learning is it's a branch of AI. It uses learning algorithms which, if fed data, can learn and can provide some value to the firm. AI then is quite simply the simulation of kind of human intelligence through machines. Data science is the overarching term, I would call it, which is a study of where information comes from and how it can add value. I think that there's another part there. But also what's important and is often overlooked, and really it's the key problem that we have found time and time again at Spectra, is on the data engineering side. How do you structure that data so it can be used? And to sum it up, there's a last point which should come across, and it is that it is the engineers who allow data scientists' jobs possible. Because what you can find is there are lots of great stuff which we can do. In business, what do we need to do? So hopefully that gives a bit of a framing for what data science and AI is about. If I now look at some of the key areas where it is making a difference, I think that the areas of interest for cybersecurity are, as it says, in the threat detection and prevention. If we look at the first one then, network threat analysis, I think that network topologies are increasing in size and complexity, and the effort to manage and to monitor the transactions, connections, applications, and the policies, it grows exponentially with the complexity of each network. AI, by its nature, has the processing power that can monitor network traffic. It can mine for strange activities, and it can classify threats according to existing policies and signatures. Malware, as we know, is evolving at a rapid speed, from kind of botnets through to malvertising and ransomware, which is a big challenge at the moment. Machine learning is well suited to inference techniques that can use signature-based systems, and they can spot any of those anomalies. What also helps in this space is if you look at things like the US government NVD, which has got malware sample databases that allow us to check for security checklist references, for security related software flaws and misconfigurations. All of these common good approaches help the growing potency of well-trained algorithms to identify potential malware at speed. I would say that probably the most, back up one, please. I would say that probably the most important of the assistance is in the human analyst augmentation. And I say that because at its most fundamental, humans and AI are kind of very complementary. AI's power lies in its ability to manage structured volume, and this makes it very effective at identifying threat vectors. Humans are tuned to rapidly assess risks and to apply sentience and knowledge in making key decisions. I think that this coalition offers benefits in two key areas. The first is that we can automate repetitive tasks. And so it's possible to tune an AI engine just to deal with the low risk tasks and to work with incomplete data sets, which will allow us a more truer picture. And the second is to rapidly visualize data and to highlight potential courses of action, which is a real win. I think that the final area that we should look at in this space is AI-based threat mitigation. And here I think that we could be on the cusp of a new Cold War. It's got numerous examples where hackers are now using machine learning to identify weak points in networks. If you look at the recent Equifax breach, which was about $575 million, the US Senate investigation identified a backlog of over 8,500 unpatched vulnerabilities at Equifax, and the hacker only needed to find one. AI is also being used in the offensive to obfuscate and to scale attack vectors, including phishing and spyware. But if I go to the next slide, there are no silver bullets. And we need to be careful of adversarial machine learning. In this space, I think that there are many pitfalls in placing total reliance on AI if that's to reduce your cyber risk. I think that we've all seen enough evidence and examples of where AI bias is becoming a real headache for those wishing to roll out AI. Fake news provides a useful and a worrying example of how it can easily be exploited. In recent months, what we've seen is that Twitter has had to close around about 170,000 bots thought to have originated from China that were fueling the global C-19 hysteria. Closer to home, we can see the stories around COVID-19 testing centers. But if I look into the second one with data poisoning, again, something that's not new, but is targeting one of the least or the most overlooked of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And by that, I mean integrity. Stuxnet is an excellent example of where that data poisoning came to good effect, because if you recall what happened, it was the integrity of the data on the system which was actually compromised that led to its physical destruction. More recently, during a kind of Cybertech Israel event, it was February this year, we had an example of a cyber PhD student who talked through their research project, which was in essence the infiltration of a medical facility where they had an AI program on a stick that could interfere with the radiology images, which meant that those that were negative to the human eye looked no different, but to the AI system, which was analyzing them, came back as positive and could have ground that system to a halt. If we think of the current situation that we're in now, we can see exactly where the challenges are. Model poisoning is also an attack vector, which is becoming more popular. And by this, what happens is you feed the model with poisoned data or with data that you're expecting certain answers. And from that, you can reverse engineer the model architecture and then rebuild it and anticipate what the responses are. This was one of the talks at Black Hat 20 this year. And what the example was was a group of hackers who had put fake apps onto an Android store so they could observe user behavior, capture that behavior, put their apps on the store, and thereby avoid the fraud detection signatures which were in place. That said, it still has means that we can mitigate these threats. So block lists work well. It's also important with anything around AI that you verify data accuracy and possibly offer from multiple signals. So at the Black Hat in 2020 demo, it was found that you could have a 75% reduction in false positives for facial recognition if you use 2 or more cameras and you take them from different distances and angles. What you also must do is don't expose raw statistics to users. So again, rounding up model outputs is an easy and effective way to obfuscate, and it can reduce that reverse engineering component of model leakage by up to 60%. If I move from where we are now in terms of where AI is going and its problems and go to the far distance, I think that if we go to blue sky, in the long term, our big challenge will be if narrow goes general. And what do I mean by that? At the moment, all of the AI which we have in place sits in the narrow space. And I think I've seen Stephen Bonner on there, and I know he's talking about an apocalypse day a kind of presentation from a while ago. There are plenty of chess computer machines out there that can beat grandmasters at chess. That's a narrow solution. If it hits the point where that machine works out the way it can still win at chess is to prevent its opponent from turning up at the event, then it still wins. That goes general. So although our chess machines are superb at beating grandmasters, they can't walk upstairs or open doors. If we hit the point where narrow goes general, then the gloves are off. I think that's why at the moment, a lot of what we're seeing in the AI ethics space and some of the painful journey which we're going through is to prevent us from getting to that judgment day. Closer to home, I think a further consideration is the advent of quantum. Because if and when quantum comes about, we will see a fundamental change in the speed at which data can be processed, and this will have big implications for the cyber security space. What it will mean is that many of the algorithms and the encryption keys which we've got could be decrypted in near real time. We know that the Chinese have already got, as they're calling it, a quantum network in place. It's very, very fragile, so its sustainability is kind of questionable. We know that IBM and the Americans are offering quantum style options with their Q research pieces. So it is coming, and it's closer than, thankfully, general AI, but it will change how our cybersecurity is implemented. In summary then, I think we've got huge advantages of integrating AI into cybersecurity, and I think what I've said is that journey has already started. I've covered off some of the operational benefits, those being network threat analysis, malware, AI threat integration, and probably most importantly at the moment is the security analyst augmentation. However, it has got risks. These are less well defined and are commonly misunderstood, and we need to be clearer on those as we go forward. As I've said, AI bias is real. AI is a tool that must be used skillfully, or it can cause huge damage, especially if the underlying data sets are inaccurate. I think that's probably all for me. So if there's any questions, or I think maybe we're leaving questions until the end.
Yeah, Chris, that was fantastic. If you wouldn't mind leaving questions to the end, I think we can maybe try and take more of a panel style format, if that's all right. I found that interesting and informative. Certainly the points around kind of SOC and IR augmentation and enrichment. That's something that I'm looking at the moment, one of many things, but yeah, very interesting. Thank you. We'll switch gears now to a bit of a view of our industry more broadly. I'm sure, Dan, that AI and ML will come up somewhere in this presentation. But yeah, I'm delighted today to have Dan Raywood, Deputy Editor, Infosec magazine, join us. I much prefer it this way round, Dan, that I'm introducing you rather than the other way, mate. So
yeah, it makes a change, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is much better for me. So yeah, I don't want to steal your thunder on this. You know, I've been involved in this review that you've been doing a couple of times on the state cybersecurity report. Some of the findings from this year are interesting, and I know you're going to run through kind of some of the major points from the previous years. So I'll leave it with you. Good luck with the next, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to try the next now. So I'm going to try and see where the next button is. But if not, Sophie, if you can just let me just try and push that on, see if it works. If not, I will ad lib. Well, let me just give you the quick overview then of the state of cybersecurity report. I'm going to try and see. There we go. Right. Let me just collapse my screen because I don't need to see what I look like. So yeah, just a quick overview then of the state of cybersecurity report. I can give you some details if you want to know a lot more about this as we get towards the end. But yeah, I work for Infosecurity magazine. Hopefully some of you have heard of that. I'm sure you've heard of Infosecurity Europe, which is owned by the same company, where we operate separately, but we do work pretty close together. And somewhere, hopefully you can see, I've got all the Zoom controls, so I can't see my what the details are at the bottom, but I think they're the Infosecurity magazine website. So let me try and push on the screens. I'm not seeing a button. Maybe if I just press the right button and see what happens there. If not, no, we'll just ask to
That's what I did, Dan. It went 3 forward.
I'm not going to touch anything, Chris, to be honest. I could just talk over this for 20 minutes, you know me. So, okay, well, I'm just going to let, maybe let the team, yeah, that's what I look like. So I'm sure you can see that. And that was me, a picture I took about a year ago, because every other photo of me has brown hair, let's put it that way. So, yeah, I've been Deputy Editor of Infosecurity since December 15. I've been in Infosecurity since 2015. Also former analyst with 451. And of course, some of you, most people seem to still remember me from my time at SC Magazine, which was 7 years ago, but I appreciate that for everyone who still remembers that. If we go to the next slide then, we'll just run over what the state of cybersecurity report for 2018 then. So this is when we started this. And the idea was we see lots and lots of reports, and a lot of them are extremely good. There's no doubt about that. Please click through to all of the points. Yeah, so this is a 2018 report, and we thought, let's try and create one that's just, you know, just what based on who we talk to, you know, so it wasn't maybe sort of the quantity of people. You know, you might see some reports feature thousands and thousands of people. We went to people actually individually. Now, for this one in particular, we went to 32 people. You might sort of think that's not very much. Well, we kind of started a bit late, to be completely honest, and we launched this at Infosec. But excuse me, the turnout of the presentation, the live event was really, really brilliant. And in particular, we collected sort of the most of the data between sort of February and April 2018. So when we sort of triaged all the results, this was the top result, was GDPR was the top trend. So we just asked people, what do you think is the big trend driving cybersecurity? And I'm sure I don't need to tell a bunch of cybersecurity professionals, trying to get a project off the ground is the hardest bit. Once you've done it once, it's probably a bit easier. So these got a bit better over time. So that was the 2018 result, was GDPR was the big drive. If you want to push to the next slide, this is 2019. I think got a little bit more improved, because we did go to 60 people. This was last year. So we'd like to have lunch, really nice lunch with Chris last year when we talked about this. And again, it was, the trends sort of really changed because they came more about what we call technology troubles. Now, what we meant by that was configuration issues, things not really working as they promised, just general sort of a bad sort of vibe around technology generally, not really being as performance led as it was sort of being led to believe to be. Human factors pretty consistent. Compliance drops a couple of places down to third. Board engagement, and then automation, which we'll come back onto. So let's move on to this year's then. So again, there's a lot more details, and somewhere I think in the end, last slide is my email address, and you can catch me on Twitter as well. It's just my name, Dan Raywood, and tweet me, and I'll be more than happy to share sort of results and webinars we did. So 2020, we thought this year we're going to try and go a little bit different. So the number went up slightly again, 75 people, conducted between March and May. Really do kind of churn through a lot of meetings in those times. But one thing I was very determined to do was try and reach, not just go to sort of 75 people like yourself listening, or 75 people like Chris or Steve, whatever, you're listening. Try and split it a bit more and see how the industry is split between 3 verticals. So we went with 3 ways, which is 25 people who work in academia, so people who are like teachers or obviously professors, more university level, or actually some of those were students as well. 25 people who I'd call practitioners, so there were some vendors in there was some analysts in there, some just different people from across the industry, consultants, that sort of thing, people actually doing the job. And then 25 people who came from sort of the VC sector, because I thought, let's try and get people who are investing in this industry, try and see where they see it going. So this is where we kind of thought it makes it a little bit different. So as you'll see from the screen right there, 34 distinct trends. That's from 75 conversations. Now, if I, obviously I can't see you because we're all virtual, but if I said name 34 trends, you'd probably struggle for maybe more than about 5. You really start thinking, okay, let's, even if you went and read up on all the Gartner reports and every other report, you think, okay, maybe we push it to 10. But 34 just shows how widely we all think in this industry, and that really was quite that's why the numbers are never sort of like 80% of people said this, is because it's so spread across that the numbers aren't hugely high. So 5 distinct trends, 5 top trends, excuse me, and then 5 sort of lower trends, and then there were 5 single response trends. I think we're not going to bother with the lower or the single response. So let's just move on to we'll quickly burn through the top 5. And so the top one was COVID-19, which is probably not a huge surprise, but as you can see that in that only cited by 30% of our audience, of the respondents, it's in there somewhere, 30% of the respondents said COVID-19 was the top trend. If you can move on again, the reason, this was an impact on cybersecurity. This was, sort of the black swan event of the year, obviously. And why COVID-19? These are some of the actual reasons that were cited to us by the people we talked to, talking about straining to enable remote workers. This may all seem like very, very familiar to most of you, I'm sure. Projects put on hold, spending has been on equipping remote workers. Again, these were all collectively March and May. Of course, I did most of these on the phone. I didn't get to do a lot of these in person, which would have been a much more preferable. Because the attacks we've seen more and more about, creating emergency plans, and also deployment of things like VPN, video conferencing, like this one. And now I just push on to the next slide, Pete, because you might sort of think, well, why did we, at least a few comments from the report, sorry, these are just some of the actual comments which go from the report. There's 4 of those altogether. So yeah, just again, much of what we've just been talking about, the soft and remains the executive teams, sort of credential reuse, work from home, place the onus of security on the corporation, etc. You can get this report for free. You can read all these much more in context, but I just wanted to pick these out just to give you a bit more talking points. So if we can push the next slide. So obviously this being the kind of the black swan event, as we had with GDPR in 2018, I went back to those people who cited that 30% and I said, okay, if you weren't going to sort of pick, if this hadn't happened, what would have been your trend? And then so they all said, now numbers, you might just have to work with me on the numbers, but according to 17% of that 30%, cloud was their top trend. So that was the main one. Again, there were still more second trends. So if you move on to the next slide, these are just some of the other things that people said. So 8%, so probably about 2 or 3 people each said phishing, adoption, new tech, orchestration. Again, that's going back to the technology problems of last year. Human factor authentication is a second trend. And then 4% each, which those of you with good maths brains will know that's pretty much one person each said IoT, ransomware, zero trust, cyber hygiene, etc. So that was kind of where we wanted to go, really, was drive that. I thought, this was a bit of a problem that this happened this year. So what have been the really, really good trends sort of driving the industry this year? So the second trend then is on the next slide, and this was about cloud, which you think it's only 4% fewer than COVID-19 if people said cloud as being the top trend here. Excuse me, because it's a real prominent thing. It does tend to really be very, very persistent. Now, this can take in all sort of different things like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, data center. I've been covering the Gartner conference the last couple of days, so my head is full of all these words like SASE and CASB and all these different things. So you caught me on a particularly good time. But on the next slide, then you'll see, these are some of the comments again. So that comment in the top left there, forced cloud and creep into corporate life for 15 years. Cloud is something that we introduced to us as an industry. We didn't sort of think, right, here's a new thing that let's all adopt it. It kind of just, that's the way things moved. And that top right comment there is the cloud is moving at such a fast pace. We've not developed the modeling and analysis approaches necessary to understand the security implications of cloud-based technology. You can read it, obviously, with me, but it's a really great quote. And I don't actually remember who gave me all these quotes. I just went through all the interview notes and picked out some of the ones that would fit on these things, the ones that really stood out. So I think might be a fourth one on this slide. Yeah, the fourth one, to avoid, companies to put guardrails in place. So a lot of positivity on cloud. I think the previous years when we've talked about cloud, it's always been a bit like this is sort of the great devil coming to get cybersecurity. When in fact, I think a lot of people now see that the benefits, and hopefully that maybe infrastructure as a service and your Azure and your AWS, etc., and your Google Clouds might actually be kind of pushing forward, because are they actually sort of enabling the security to work with them? We don't know. The only people who do that will know that. So on to the next slide then. And this is the third trend, which is automation. Now, I'm deliberately going to try and skip over this because I put a bit more detail in a few slides, spoiler alert, around automation. Obviously, this is what this webinar is about. But on the next slide, just a few more quotes on this, because it's, in previous years, there'd been this thing about AI and machine learning, and I know Chris number one speaker, I should say, will probably sort of say, oh, they're different things. And people say that to me, go, oh, you shouldn't put them on the same category. And it's like, well, do you know what? They all sit under an automation trend, and speak to any analyst, and they love pigeonholing things and saying this is where this belongs because it fits with that, and your vendor does, your vendor, for example, you built that, so you're like that, and then you say, no, we're not, we're different. But AI and machine learning do fit under this automation thing, because it is the way that things are going about actually trying to do things slightly more in tune with automated styles. So yeah, just some of these kind of comments. These are from this year. Now, if you did want to go back, and I can point you towards 2019 sort of presentations I did, and it was a lot more negative last year about AI being all about hype and automation not being really something the businesses are ready for. But 12 months on, we found the kind of the perspective to be a lot more positive. So again, we have got a bit more detail on this. Interesting, just that bottom left comment there, just about we've seen adopted through newer categories like SOAR. I've literally been this morning on a Gartner conference as part of their summit, which I think is on the website now, where they're actually saying we're at the end of SOAR already. Now, I've just really started getting on board with this technology myself and trying to understand it a bit more. They're now predicting the end of SOAR and replacement with XDR, and that's extended detection and response, I believe. So do be prepared. That's the next thing. We're already moved to SOAR 2.0. Right, let's move to the next slide then, please. So yeah, human factor, kind of always very, very persistent. It hasn't really gone away. It does take in so many points, human factor, whether it be skills gap, hiring, training, diversity, of course, is now a huge element for our industry. And also you've got the issues around certifications as well. And, we did talk to a lot of academics, and just generally the sort of the employee and how much of a part of the industry they are, part of the business they actually are, and whether it's the human firewall or whether weak uses the weakest link, etc. So on the next slide, we've got some of those comments, because it's not just diversity, and on the top right comment there, it's not just diversity in terms of who we are and what we look like. It's also how we work together, what we bring to the industry overall. And also, I think there's a couple of comments here on common themes, and excuse me, about the weakest link there. So the bottom right there, we're researching how much training and awareness is essential, and also across the bottom left there, this weakest link thing about is it their fault when in reality we're not providing the right training and explaining it. We see movements now. Anyone here is very familiar with Kai Roa, and hopefully some of you have come across him in his work. He ran a company called Culture, CLTRE. And if you've ever thought about cybersecurity culture not really being a big thing, well, his company was acquired by KnowBe4. They didn't unfortunately put a dollar amount out, which is a real shame, because we could have then said, that's the price of security culture. I might have to pin him down one day. But yeah, security culture was valuable enough for a major company like KnowBe4 to go and invest in that, just in this benchmarking thing. So it's a definitely a way we see of businesses changing. Again, these sort of comments were not so negative. the conversations about are humans the users, sorry, the weakest and strongest thing, I think that's gone away now. I think we're probably somewhere in the middle, but I think generally that the perspectives of trying to be better and help people more is obviously a step forward. And just the last of the top 5 trends is on the last next slide, sorry, which is about phishing, which it may be kind of strange to see this, because I was quite delighted to see a malware tool make it to the top trends. And considering it's been around for about 20 plus years, phishing, it's not particularly new, and it's not something we've been able to resolve either. Actually, we've done a lot this year, especially when you consider I think it was April, the Gmail report came out, which talked about the number of phishing emails they were seeing related to COVID-19. And also we're seeing a lot more conversations now about things like DMARC and standards to ensure email verification. And also you've got all the questions there about how is this still a problem? And we're not talking so much about the kind of offering you lots and lots of money if you send 20 quid over. It's more the sort of the concepts of business email compromise. It's sort of things like spear phishing, which I kind of believe they're very, very similar, but I guess they've got some distinct traits. Let's just move on to the next slide, just with those comments then, because it's social engineering fits into this as well. I think we may have put social engineering as a kind of consideration of the human factor as well. But like I said there, top left, hackers still trying to exploit the new tools of remote collaboration. And as with the COVID-19, the government did an announcement again. This could have been March. I did this interview, so I forget exactly what the SMS announcement was, but it was probably going out saying, look out for emails saying, read this email about COVID-19. Well, that's just like laying the sort of the trail for an attacker, really, because all they've got to do is then go to send an email out and make it look like that, and everyone's going to click on it. So, and like I said, it will remain effective for years. It will remain effective because it has been effective. And then just on the left, that no great revolution, and it's evolving. And this is the problem with phishing. Even though ransomware didn't make the top 5, and Trojans, whatever, they're very sort of filtered by that stage then of malware, and viruses and worms and all the kind of that sort of stuff. Phishing does kind of really stick around, and I was partly delighted that this sort of really did kind of come around and stick around. So just move on to the next slide. So I think this may just be a collection. Just that's just a reminder what the top 5 trends were. COVID-19 again, because the numbers were not particularly high. You won't see kind of 80% of people believed it was cloud or anything like that, just because that we got 34 responses, 34 different trends. And it's always fun when I get to go through and triage all the results and sort of say, right, okay, what was the top 5 of this year? And it was like, blimey, it didn't even like hit 50%. But that just shows how widely we kind of we think about these things as an industry. So I think the next slide should just be a little bit of bonus content on automation. And the reason I did this is because I thought I want to try and go back over the notes I took from the various interviews from those people who cited automation, be it AI and machine learning. And if we can just move to the next slide, I think there's the first of 2. So the first one here, I won't read each one because I'll let you do that. But these were just the main comments that we got from all the various interviews where they cited automation. So attacks are similar, algorithms are needed. Of course, that thing there, that 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth one down there, security are overworked and too much to do, and not a case of resources that cannot hire people a huge value add. You tell these quotes were pretty much exactly as I took them down and then reproduced them back in without any great proofreading to them. But this is where we see a lot of the conversations around AI, automation, etc., is because it's enabling people to automate tasks. So phishing detection, maybe, I don't know if that's something that you're able to do. We certainly write about stuff like that because people tell us you can do that, and obviously you let us know if you can do that. Also things like SOAR, I want to mention again, which I mentioned just before, SOAR, security orchestration, automation and response. Like I said, apparently according to something I saw this morning, that's now being moved on. And also the kind of bottom one, which does really sort of lend some of the slight negativity there. Another, I think it was a might have been the same presentation, which again might be on our website by now, where they said now a lot more technologies are being built with automation capabilities inside the technology. So it is actually the way that the vendors are moving now. They are actually building these APIs in to actually enable you to do automation, apparently. So if hopefully that's helping you out. I think there's another takeaways. Oh, there's two pages of takeaways. Okay, so the first page, just let's put these out. And so, just the kind of real sort of, this was a really abridged version of the full presentation, which again I can happy to send out to you if you want to message me. It's not time to dismiss compliance just yet, because compliance is obviously a huge part. And I'm sure many of you on here, it's probably even the most important thing of your job. And no one obviously dismisses the data breaches or GDPR or any kind of compliance legislation. Ditto, like I said, a black swan event has dominated the research, hence why we went back and we checked what people would say. And but it's been enormous, the impact of COVID-19. That's why we have to do things like webinars now. Mind you, this probably would have been a webinar anyway, but so we don't get to go to conferences anymore, which is a big shame. And then just move on to the second lot of the takeaways then. So yeah, this has been automation again. Takes in AI, machine learning, as I said, about the 15th time. But once again, I forget from 2018, 2019, but I think it was definitely there last year. I think it might have been there in 2018 as well. It's been consistent, and even though it's not affecting everybody in their data jobs, it's something everyone is currently thinking about. So if you're on here as a user and it's not something you've considered, then obviously, I guess Chris number one is probably your great resource on this, and I'm sure CIISec have got some other great people as well. But it's just something that everyone seems to be talking about. And then just the other, then their phishing, which we've talked about, and then bottom trend actually, which didn't make it into our top 5 at all. I think it made it into our top 10. Actually, was there about connected devices, so IoT, and also things like autonomous vehicles, which was way down. But it's this idea about the kind of slightly more industrial side, which someone might call industrial. I probably wouldn't call autonomous vehicles. I've seen a few when I was in Silicon Valley once, and I saw a Google one, and it just reminded me of that scene from Silicon Valley where the fella got put on it, ended up in the middle of the ocean on top of a shipping thing. So yeah, I'm slightly scared of autonomous vehicles so far, but who knows where things are going. It's one of the things that we can change in the industry. But that could be one if we did this again in 2021 and we went to a fourth one, we could see that come around as a popular trend for next year. So I think the next slide is my last one, which is you can download the full report. It's available via white hash papers from the Infosecurity magazine. I can't see the bottom of the screen because I've got the Zoom controls all over it, but I think down there is my email address and my Twitter at Dan Raywood. If you want to message me, just to I can send you the full presentations of the ones we did for 2019 report, and I can send some of those details over. So happy to connect with you and happy to take any questions. I think, Sophie, we've got just over 10 minutes left.
Hey, sorry, go on, Sophie.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Dan and Chris, for your presentations. I think that's probably the perfect time to start asking some questions now. Shall we kick things off, Chris? I can see we've had some great questions come in.
We have, yeah. I know that some of them have been answered privately, I think, but I think it's probably worth bringing up a couple of those for the wider audience who haven't maybe seen the Q&A box, because I'll be honest, when I'm on webinars, I rarely see that as well. And I know that Richard Sands, hey Richard, has popped a question to Chris here, just around the legal issues of kind of demonstrating decision paths, when we look at kind of an AL angle, I mean, Richard's written here, it's not impossible to demonstrate an AI's decision logic. Like how do you, let's say in a court of law, you have to go back and understand why a particular system made a decision, that forensic level of analysis, Chris. Is that something that's particularly difficult? I imagine it is.
So for some of the systems it is. I think I'll just kind of recap quickly what I kind of typed in the note. The biggest problem which you've got here is that the law moves ever so slowly, and especially when you look at something like tech, it's always going to struggle. That of its essence is why there's such a big drumbeat around AI ethics, because it's not so much I think legal, it's kind of, are they just, and if it's just, it then becomes law. So that parks up the kind of longer term philosophical journey. Some of the ML systems will be straightforward to assess because, as I've said, that we can feed it with the data and we can look at the answers. And if they fall within the bounds of tolerance, then we can say that that system is likely to operate in a certain way. Some of the AI systems, especially around neural networks, will be a bit more difficult because the way that the network learns is to do with the data which it is fed. Now, there are still means that we can look to test that, which would be around stochastic modeling, which is we throw stuff through it many times. So it is possible. Will we get there? Yes, we will, because as we know, that autonomous vehicles are safer than human drivers, but the barrier we'll have to go through will be the human acceptance of that. The law will make us do it. AI ethics will get us there by convincing us it's the right thing to do.
That makes perfect sense. So what you're basically saying there is from an ML perspective, I don't know if we're looking at some, to Dan's point, kind of SOAR and various forms of kind of, let's say, incident response, and where telemetry is in a system and we're performing ML-like actions, it's much easier than something like the broader adoption of AI in neural networks and things where there are other challenges potentially.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. I mean, we had another one actually for you, Chris, if I may, and I know you put a very detailed answer actually in the chat, was, if you're looking at AI and kind of, I suppose, a system on system warfare scenario. So Jordan Kelly's come in with, are we approaching the likelihood of AI warfare where these systems, process and technology kind of engaging with each other with very little human interaction? What's your take on that?
So yeah, I think the piece that leapt down on me, which is probably from a kind of military background, was the warfare part. It's almost impossible to say that you could have a cyber war. War is a means by which you would prosecute an offensive, and by that one, what I mean is it's just a means. It's a means to its end. I would say that we have always sought to have a system whereby we can pull the human from that, because if you do that, then you minimize risk to you. So I would say that in terms of war, we have always existed in a space whereby we've tried to use machines or whatnot to do the dirty work for us. If you look at some of the complex platforms now, like the Joint Strike Fighter, it has got amazing suites on there, which are basically designed to fool opponents. That will only go on. In the answer which I said to Jordan, there are some nations which are also trialing autonomous vehicles who will have the ability with no human interaction to engage targets. That of itself should draw breath. So that will happen anyway. The bigger question is, unless you are going to prosecute total war, and by that what I mean is I'm happy to wipe out every one of my opponents. If my AI fails against your AI and I still want to fight, and I've got that Irish tendency to fight, dare I say, I'll still find a way. And that, in essence, was the basis of the Terminator movie. So I think that AI is already at the point where machines are engaging machines without people intervening. We will continue to go down that path. It is part of warfare. Is it going to finish? Probably not. Because unless your opponent is non-existent, there is always that chance that they'll come back to find you again.
Perfect, Chris. That's a brilliant response. Thank you. I don't want to, Dan, we have a couple here for you as well, but I just, if I may, well, I'm the host, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask you one more, if I may, just from the talk there. From your experience at Spectra, are there particular industry verticals or kind of size of organization who are embracing, let's just stick on the ML side of things for now, so that leads me on to the second part of this. Is there any commonality there? I know, Dan, your whole piece was around commonality, percentages and trends. Are you seeing any of that, Chris, in company size or vertical?
Yes, I'd say the two that leap out are probably in the finance sector. Mm-hmm. You've definitely seen an ability, the speed at which you can process data, and do something with it in the finance sector and in corporate trading. means that that gives you definite competitive advantage, which is turned into business lead immediately. I would say the other side, which I've seen, is in some of the big aerospace industries, whereby the complexity of the machines which are operating and the mean time to failure and the need to keep those variables at a minimum means to have sensors and data in near real time allows you to keep your machines, which are very expensive, operational, and that keeps you in the air, or it keeps you in the high-tech industry space where you are. So I'd say aerospace, oil and gas, and fintech are probably the leads that we see at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. That's really insightful. There's a few more that I have here around kind of AI biases and things, but I wanted to just turn it to Dan, if I may, because I know we only have kind of 6 minutes. I'm sure, Chris, we can pick up offline and share Twitter details and things. That'd be great. Dan, I was just writing down your quote there, which I thought was brilliant before we went on, around we haven't got rid of compliance yet. I'm not sure if that's what you said verbatim, but that's a Twitter post if ever I'd heard one. What I had, and again, it stood out to me as you were speaking, you've said obviously this year that the number one challenge was the pandemic, which I understand. The point around cloud and its prevalence in that report, do you feel there's a cause and effect there? Do you think that's why, as organizations are being affected by the pandemic and distributed working has become what it is? Did you get any further commentary on that? I just thought that was a nice kind of association, maybe, or not.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. That is a good association, because I think we are, from my memory, obviously, I don't have the sort of memory of every quote, but I think what we've seen since and what I've heard since has been people saying that actually, again, my head's full of Gartner at the moment because I've been covering their conference, but they've been talking about the fact that people have moved to cloud because of basically data centers now, whether it's an end of the, going to the physical workplaces and things like that. From my experience of going to data centers, there's everybody in them anyway. There's usually about 2 or 3 people hanging around, so they're probably the most socially distanced places on earth because no one can hear anything. That's a very good point. I guess the point I'm trying to make was that I think where you go back sort of 10 years ago, and obviously I'm sure you've been around to remember the time when cloud was kind of coming in and creeping in, and sort of 10 plus years ago. I think now it has kind of caught up, and I don't think it's seen as a prohibitor anymore. I think it's as an enabler, to use a kind of a buzzword, really, because I think where once upon a time cloud was probably seen as being something that's going to be a problem for your businesses because everyone's going to put data out there. You don't have any control of your applications. You don't have any control of the software that works. You're going to be hit by lag. You're going to be hit by all these problems. I think now we're at a situation where people actually will say, no, the stuff has got really good because of those 3 companies, because of Microsoft, Google, and who's the other one? It's Google, AWS, Microsoft, Amazon. Sorry, obviously, AWS, Amazon, and Google and Microsoft. Three, really huge companies have come along and sort of almost driven this market forwards. I'm not saying security is the reason it's done that, but obviously their security has been built into that. And I don't think we could find another example of something where a revolution was driven, where security was almost at the heart of it, because that was what had to be part of it. And I'm not saying it's all about security, but at the same time, I think security is actually a key part of what they're trying to do. If they came along and said, oh yeah, we forgot about that, well, that's where it was 12 years ago. We don't get that now. So to kind of a long way back round to your question, yeah, I think it has. I think it has driven the way people can work much more efficiently, because it had to catch up, really. There had to be a new way of doing things. And I think those vendors that are doing SaaS and MSSP stuff are actually probably reaping the benefits, actually.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thanks, Dan. We have a couple of minutes now. I'm just checking the channel for other questions. I mean, I could go on all day with you two here, getting views on various different things. I mean, one of the observations that I had, Chris, during your talk, you talked about data poisoning and AI bias. One of the challenges I have when I'm evaluating, and I'm now going to lump down XDR, SOAR, orchestration, automation, and machine learning all into one big thing when I say what I'm going to say, is data incompleteness, isn't it? If that's a phrase, if you're going to look at the traditional use case of incident response and security operations of, potentially, if you take that funnel of fidelity and moving kind of automation into triage and hopefully investigation, if you can get it to be intelligent enough, how do you ensure that you have all the sources that you need? So, I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that it's data poisoning or anything nefarious in nature, but just the incomplete nature of the data. Maybe that's more what you're talking about, Chris, with AI biases. But for some cybersecurity use cases, that's been a major challenge for me. Is we can't automate because we know we still need to go away. We can't make automated decisions, I should say, because we have incomplete data. I don't know if maybe that's more an observation than a question. I don't know what your view is, Chris.
I think the key one here is, and I'm probably drawing again on the kind of military side of life, but if you accept that you will never have all the information that you need to make a perfect decision, then you won't go too far wrong. One of the pieces which I do see that we really need to work hard against is people hold a handrail of AI and all of those other decision-making tool sets and processes to say, it's not me, it's the machine that told me how to do it. And we've seen it with the COVID-19. You cannot follow the science. Science doesn't ask to be followed. It simply gives you an answer which is factual. That's why it's called AI. It's artificial intelligence. It's there to support you in your decision-making. You're the one who makes that decision. You're the one who takes the risk. You're the one who moves forward. So until we get to artificial sentience, which is, as we go general, treat it for what it is. It's a tool to help you make a decision. I look to you, you make that decision.
I get you. So if we're looking at orchestration, we still need a conductor of the orchestra, kind of.
Yeah.
I'd like to say I just thought of that. I wrote it down somewhere recently. But yeah, I think that's certainly relevant here. So well, we're at the top of the hour. I'm respectful of everyone's time who's joined. We've had a great attendance today. So thank you to everyone. I would say, I mentioned the Pulse magazine earlier. Do check out this quarter's release, AI and machine learning. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you at future virtual and in-person sessions. So to Dan, to Chris, to Sophie for organising this today. Thanks everyone, and see you again soon.
Thanks everybody.
Guys.
Thank you everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you.